And for the first 30 minutes, always look forward to this point in the week. I'm joined by the Associate Editor of The Spectator, columnist there, of course, columnist in The Sun, columnist in The Sunday Times, Rod Liddle. Welcome, Rod.
Hiya, Kevin. And the answer to your question about the Lib Dems is they are a gift to satirists everywhere.
Yeah.
And if they didn't exist, we'd have to invent them.
Yeah.
And it's a great shame because, of course, at one time they were a viable party that represented, non-conformist belief and liberal thought, particularly the northwest of England. All that's gone. All of it's gone. They are now all suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome.
They are. One of them's suffering from having been nicked last night, allegedly sexually assaulting some other member of the party in a late-night booze-up. We all know the danger of those conferences.
We do. But that's, I mean, you mentioned two things and they didn't seem to be linked, but, we're over-diagnosing everything. We're over-diagnosing post-traumatic stress syndrome by the sound of things. And we're certainly over-diagnosing the things which enable your doctor to sign you off on the sick for 5 days. We know from studies that we're over-diagnosing ADHD, dyslexia, and all that kind of stuff. We're over-diagnosing certain mental illnesses. It's over-diagnosis is the problem.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that later on. And, of course, over-diagnosis or mental health problems do seem to crop up a hell of a lot with people who are accused of paedophile offences. For example, Huw Edwards, whose mental health trauma throughout the saga of his decline and fall at the BBC has been prevalent in his story. Obviously it broke yesterday, Rod, that he'd already admitted these, looking at all these photos, quite serious offences. Yesterday, of course, he avoided jail. Everyone was pretty shocked by that. Your paper, The Sun, I picked up this morning, Huw Edwards, why didn't he go to jail? See pages 2, 4, 6, 3, about 48 pages. But it is a big story, and this is why. People say, that he got special treatment because he's a celebrity. I don't think he did, to be fair. 8 out of 10 first-time paedophile offenders don't go to jail. Now, that, I think, is something we have to question. Meanwhile, as I said in my monologue just then, these white working-class rioters, and particularly the old biddies who put hurty words onto Facebook, they went to jail double quick. Now, one of the mitigating factors of Huw Edwards, or the leniency, if you like, towards Huw Edwards, was that he swiftly pleaded guilty. Well, so did the rioters. So did the Facebook ladies. But apparently they were sent to jail because their offences were aggravated by racial aggravation and the fact they targeted emergency workers. That meant instant jail. So what we're saying here in the great scheme of justice is that we think it's worse to target emergency workers than it is to target little kids for sexual gratification. I would say that we ought to recalibrate that line of thinking.
Yeah, look, here's what I think. I think you need to take Huw Edwards out of the equation, to be absolutely honest. I think, it wasn't simply that he pleaded guilty early. It was also the level of his repentance and the fact that he'd never had a previous conviction. And if you look at all that, we can argue, rightly or wrongly, about whether the sentencing on paedophile offences is right. But there's no question in my mind, having looked at it and looked at the sentence as it compares to other people who committed similar offences, that there was no special treatment for him whatsoever. It was just simply that is what we do to people who view horrible images of children being abused. And we can argue that those sentences should be longer. But, of course, sentences generally everywhere are getting shorter. There is a genuine question, though, and I don't think it's about two-tier policing. I think it's about the vulnerability of our judicial system to political interference. and to being swayed politically. And that's, what happened both to the rioters and indeed those people who simply said, who is Allah, with an expletive obviously in there somewhere, and got 18 months. I think one guy got 18 months for saying, who is Allah? That simply doesn't compute. That is not justice. That is a horrible perversion of justice, and it's a perversion which is politically motivated. Much as it was, you have to say, for those Just Stop Oil protesters, a couple of whom got 4 and 5 years. Yeah, they caused great inconvenience. Yes, we wish the police had acted earlier, but it was kind of because the police didn't act earlier and this furor grew up, particularly in the press, that suddenly the courts thought, oh, we'd better do something. And it's another case of politics bleeding in to the judicial system. And what should happen on every occasion, whether it be with Huw Edwards or any of the other BBC's long list of pedos, or whether it's,
safe haven for pedos, the state broadcast.
No matter who they are, whether it's Huw Edwards or Jemima Skank from Chorley, who shouted "kill all the Muslims" or whatever horrible incendiary things they said. Their cases should be heard in isolation, away from the influence of politics, and that never happens anymore. Mm-hmm. It used to happen a bit, but it never happens anymore. We've got a judiciary which is too easily swayed by politics, and it doesn't help, for example, when the Home Office, when those rioters were arrested, decided that they were all guilty. Which,
that's right. That's Yvette Cooper, was it? They're all criminals.
Criminals. Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Rod. Here's a phrase that magistrates and judges use. They say, I'm going to sentence you to 6 months. And then there's always a pregnant pause. And then it's suspended for 2 years. Now, the translation of that is, I'm going to let you off. What is the point of suspended sentences? Can you explain them to me?
Well, theoretically, it's if you commit the same offence again, then your sentence is invoked. And yet it very rarely seems to be so. I think we've got to face up to the fact that we don't have enough jail spaces. The government has tried to address this matter by letting everybody out, which I think will have a limited benefit to the country somehow. But we don't have enough jail spaces, and the trend, it's a kind of two-pronged attack, isn't it? Firstly, there's a practical thing. We don't have enough places to send these people. And secondly, there's this continued left liberalish idea that we mustn't send people to prison unless they committed a crime against someone who's transgendered or female. Those are the only people. It's really funny when you look at what the left argues for. It argues for shorter sentences. Prison doesn't work. It shouldn't be about retribution. It shouldn't be about teaching people a lesson. Well, what we've got to do, we've got to move towards a Norway system where it really isn't about punishment anymore, unless it's a hate crime or something committed against women. Exactly. In which case, they think the sentences should be longer. There is no rationality to that approach whatsoever. It's either one or the other. I think but you're quite right. Yeah,
suspended sentences are a waste of time, and this would be a better country if we didn't have hate crimes either. But let me before we go to break, Rod, let me ask you about your former employers at the BBC. I'll tell you what, that Tim Davie, that Director General, he doesn't mess about. Do you know what he said today about Huw Edwards? Listen to this. This is tough talking. This man has just been convicted of appalling crimes. And it's pretty straightforward in my mind. I can't see him working here again. But by the way, Rod, he goes on to say, on a more serious note, that it was the right decision to continue paying Huw Edwards for months after his arrest, but insists they will keep trying to get the money back. He won't give the money back, as we discussed last week. Well,
if it was the right thing to continue paying him, why is it also the right thing to ask for the money back?
Exactly.
You can't have it both ways. It's one or the other, surely.
So the BBC once again have proved that, present them with a crisis, and let's face it, they get a lot, and they were 100% guaranteed to screw it up every single time, aren't they?
Yes, and it's because of two things. Firstly, the bureaucratic nature. Three things, rather. Firstly, the bureaucratic nature of the institution. Secondly, the fact that they exist entirely in a bubble where everything they do, their colleagues tell them is right. And thirdly, that they're not in the commercial sector and don't have to suffer the same pressures that commercial institutions do.
Indeed.